Arizona Territory, June 1877. Dust clung to the boots of every man in Bisbee, but none more than the tall cowboy leaning against the post outside the livery stable, arms folded, hat tipped low to block the sun. Cassian Cole had not planned to stop long. He had water to haul, fence wire to buy, and a trail to ride before nightfall. But when the shouting started near the saloon, something pulled him toward it, not the usual brawl, not gunfire. It was sharper, angry voices, a woman crying. By the time he reached the square, half the town had gathered. A rusted wagon stood in the middle of the street. A man in a stained vest barked out numbers while two girls barefoot, dirt smudged, wrists tied stood side by side on the wagon bed. One clung to the other, trembling. "Two sisters," the man shouted. Fit for housework, good health, sold together, no separate bids. Cassian's jaw clenched. He had seen a lot in his years, but this was filth. He stepped closer, scanning the girls. The older one had sharp shoulders, eyes narrowed to slits, protective, angry. The younger girl, she could not have been older than 16, looked frozen. Both too thin. Both scared out of their minds. The auctioneer jabbed a finger toward the older one. "Name's Selah, 17, strong as a mule. The little one's her sister, Sadie, 14. Their drunk of a father dropped them off this morning for whiskey money." Cassian's stomach turned. He looked around. No one moved. $20, someone finally called. Cassian stepped forward. "50? The crowd hushed. The auctioneer blinked. "You got $50 in your pocket, mister." Cassian did not answer. He just opened the pouch tied to his belt and dropped the coins into the dust at the man's feet. "Sold." Selah's eyes locked with his as he climbed the wagon. She pulled Sadie behind her like a shield. "You do not touch her," Selah said, voice low but steady. Cassian's voice was calm. "I am not here to hurt either of you," Sadie sniffled, hiding her face in Selah's shoulder. "You bought us," Selah said bitterly. "I bought your freedom." Selah's eyes flickered, but she did not lower her guard. Cassian untied their wrists gently and helped them down. He led them through the crowd without another word, just the sound of boots in dirt and the weight of every eye in town watching. Back at his horse, he handed Selah the canteen. She took it, hesitated, then offered it to Sadie first before drinking for herself. "You have a place to go?" he asked. Selah shook her head. "Not since our mama died. Father drank everything else away." Cassian looked at his horse, then at the two girls. "I have a ranch north of here. 2 days' ride. You can come. I will keep you safe." Sadie clutched Selah's hand tighter. Selah studied him long, her jaw tense. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Cassian looked away. "Because no one else did." They rode out before sundown. By the time they reached his ranch, the girls had both fallen asleep in the back of the wagon. Cassian had not said much along the trail. He gave Selah his coat one night when the wind picked up, and she had stared at it for 10 minutes before finally wrapping it around herself. When Sadie cried in her sleep, Selah whispered to calm her like a mother would. His ranch was modest but clean: 2 horses, a few hens, a half-built second barn. He let them stay in the guest room, gave them space. For the first few days, Selah barely spoke. She watched everything. Watched him fix the porch rail. Watched how he carried Sadie's breakfast tray when she stayed in bed with a fever. Watched how he never once raised his voice. One morning, Cassian was chopping wood when he heard footsteps behind him. Selah set down a bucket of fresh picked eggs. "You did not have to buy us," she said. He wiped sweat from his brow. "I know." She folded her arms. "You do not want anything." Cassian stared at her. "I want you to feel safe, that is all." She shook her head like she did not believe him. "Men always want something." He leaned the axe against the woodpile. "I am not most men." She looked down. Her hands were shaking. He stepped back, giving her space. "You sleep any better last night?" "A little." She did not cry. "No, she has not spoken much either." Selah nodded. "You are doing right by her." Selah blinked fast, then turned away like she did not want him to see the tears. Cassian let her walk off without a word, but something shifted that day. Weeks passed. Sadie began to smile again. She helped in the garden, chased the chickens, laughed when Cassian's dog knocked over the wash bucket. Cassian would catch Selah watching from the porch, her eyes softer now. Like she was waiting to see if it would all fall apart. It did not. Selah began to help with chores. She carved a spoon from a piece of driftwood and left it on the kitchen table. She patched his shirt when it tore. She smiled once when he tripped over the dog. One evening, after supper, they sat on the porch in the quiet. Sadie had gone to bed. The stars were out. "Where did you come from?" Selah asked. "Georgia. Left after the war ended. Too many ghosts." She nodded. "We were born in Texas. Mama died 2 winters ago. Everything went bad after that." Cassian looked at her. "You do not have to tell me, Selah. I want to." She told him about the nights she carried Sadie to the neighbor's barn to sleep when their father came home drunk, about hiding money in the stove pipe, hoping to save enough to run, about hearing her father trade them for 2 bottles and a night at the saloon. Cassian did not speak. He just listened. When she finished, she looked at him, raw and tired. "We are not broken, I know, but she still wakes up screaming sometimes. That will pass." She looked at him for a long moment. "You are too kind for someone with eyes like yours." He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "You are too brave for someone who has never known peace." They sat in silence. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder. He did not move, just let her stay there, and for the first time in years, Cassian Cole felt something in his chest begin to thaw. The monsoon rolled in just as the wheat sprouted in the back pasture, carrying the scent of mesquite and rain. Cassian stood at the edge of the field, hat in hand, watching the sky break open. Thunder rolled low and far off, steady as hooves on hardpan. He didn't mind the storm. It gave him something to listen to besides the ache inside him. Behind him, the door creaked open. Selah stepped onto the porch, her braid damp from the washbasin. She didn't say anything, just leaned against the post and looked out over the land like it belonged to her now, too. "You always this quiet when it rains?" she asked. Cassian didn't turn. "Only when there's nothing worth saying." Selah crossed her arms. "Sadie wanted to sleep with the window open, said the sound made her feel safe. She's coming along." "She is. You are too." Selah hesitated. "I don't know what that means." Cassian shifted his weight, one boot sinking slightly into the softening earth. "You breathe easier now. Don't flinch when the floorboards creak." Selah stepped down into the yard, her dress brushing the tops of her boots. "You think I'm just waiting to fall apart?" "No," Cassian said. "I think you've been holding the weight of 2 people for too long." She let the rain find her. It darkened the shoulders of her dress, clung to her eyelashes. She didn't wipe it away. "What did you do before this?" she asked. Cassian glanced at her. "Before the war or after?" "After. Drove cattle, fixed fences, dug graves." Selah looked at him. "Graves," he nodded. "Somebody had to." There weren't many left who could still use a shovel and keep their hands from shaking. She watched him a moment, then walked past him, out toward the fence line. He followed. The grass grew high along the edges, green and wild from the rain. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked. "No, why not? There's nothing out there I want." Selah stopped beside the gate, fingers brushing the wood. "You ever think about what you do want?" He studied her, the way her hand lingered on the latch like it might open something else entirely. "Sometimes. I think I want a little garden," she said, "with onions and carrots, maybe a plum tree if the soil's kind. You could have that." "I don't know how. I do." They stood there, side by side, the quiet filling up with rain and thunder. Cassian reached out slowly, brushing a stray curl back from her cheek. Selah looked up at him, eyes unreadable. "You touched me. I can stop." "No," she whispered. "I just forgot what it felt like to be touched without fear behind it." He let his hand fall. "I won't take anything from you. I know." She moved closer then, until her shoulder rested against his. They watched the storm roll east, where the hills turned blue in the distance. "My mama used to say storms bring change," Selah said, "but it don't come all at once." "Just a little at a time," Cassian nodded. "That's how healing works too." She didn't answer, but she stayed close, and when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. Her fingers were cold from the rain, but steady in his. Behind them, the house stood quiet and warm, safe. Like it had been waiting for all 3 of them to finally come home. The mornings came cooler now, late summer pulling its breath in slow. Cassian rose before light, as always, but he wasn't alone in the kitchen anymore. Selah had taken to waking just after him, tying her hair back with a strip of calico, bare feet quiet on the plank floor. She didn't ask what needed doing. She simply moved, her hands steady, her presence unspoken but sure. That morning she was tending to the sourdough starter, sleeves pushed to the elbow when Cassian came in from the barn with a bucket of fresh milk. He set it down slow, watching the way her fingers worked the flour into the dough without hesitation. "You ever worked in a kitchen before?" he asked. Selah kept kneading. "Once, for a woman in San Saba, she let us sleep in the root cellar during the hot months." Cassian leaned against the counter. "She treat you decent?" "She left us alone. That counted for plenty," he nodded. The stove crackled, fire catching on the kindling she'd stacked the night before. Selah glanced at him, then down at her hands. "I was thinking about the sewing room. That back corner's got good light." "For what?" Sadie's been asking after needlework. "Thought if I fixed up that old table, it might give her something of her own." Cassian crossed his arms. "You think she's ready?" "She needs more than chores. She needs to make something. I think it'd help." He studied her for a moment, then gave a short nod. "I'll patch the window. Let in better air." Selah didn't smile, but something eased in her face. She turned back to the dough, folding it one last time before setting it to rise. Later that afternoon, Cassian found Sadie out by the stream, gathering stones into her apron. He crouched nearby, not too close, and watched her sort them by shape and color. "You building something?" he asked. Sadie shrugged. "Maybe," he pointed to a flat gray one. "That looks like a fish." Her lips pressed together, then shyly she turned it sideways. "I thought it looked like a feather." "Could be both." She didn't answer, but she didn't leave either. When the breeze picked up, she pulled her shawl tighter and kept working. By dusk, Selah had cleared the table and lit the lamp. Cassian came in with dust on his sleeves and a rip in his glove, and she handed him a basin of water without a word. He washed up, then sat across from her, the scrape of chair legs the only sound between them. "I saw Sadie by the creek," he said. "She's got a good eye. She used to draw birds in the dirt back home. Before everything," Cassian dried his hands. "You think she'd want paper?" Selah looked up. "You'd get her some, if she asks." Selah leaned back in her chair, the lamp catching the curve of her jaw. "She's starting to hum again, little songs Mama used to sing." Cassian watched her for a long moment. "And you, what about me? What do you want to bring back?" She hesitated, her eyes dropped to her hands. "I don't know what I used to be before." "You don't have to be who you were. You just have to be who you are now." Selah met his gaze, and something in her expression shifted, less guarded, more searching. "I never thought I'd land anywhere," she said quietly. "Not for real. This place is yours if you want it." He said it like it wasn't a question. Selah stood and walked to the window. Outside, the night stretched quiet, the wind moving through the grass like breath. She rested her palm against the sill. "Sometimes I think I see Mama in the dusk light," she said. "Not like a ghost, just like she's still watching." Cassian rose and joined her. He didn't touch her, just stood close, looking out into the dark. "She'd be proud of you," he said. Selah turned to him. "You don't know that. I do." He looked down at her, eyes steady, voice low. "You didn't just keep your sister alive. You kept her gentle." Selah's breath caught, and for a moment she didn't respond. Then slowly she reached for his hand. Fingers threaded together, warm and certain. Neither of them said anything more. They didn't need to. By early September, the light stretched long and gold across the hills, and the sound of crickets thickened in the evenings. Cassian had begun clearing the old corral behind the barn, pulling up brittle posts and coiled wire, trying to make use of the land left idle too long. Selah found him there late one afternoon, sleeves rolled up, sun sharp on her cheekbones. She carried a small bundle wrapped in muslin. "I found these in a crate behind the root cellar," she said. "Old seed pouches, some still good." Cassian leaned on the shovel. "What kind?" "Collards. Squash. There's a paper with planting cycles. Thought maybe next spring." He took the bundle from her hands, careful not to tear the fabric. You thinking of staying that long? Selah didn't look away. I'm already here, Cassian nodded slow. You want a garden, we'll make one. I want more than roots in the ground. He held her gaze. Tell me. I want to wake up and know the place I am belongs to me. Not because someone gave it, but because I built something inside it. You already have. Not yet. Cassian folded the cloth and tucked it into his coat. Then we'll keep building. That night, the fire burned low in the hearth when she came to the kitchen with a strip of linen and a chipped tin of salve. Cassian sat at the table, sharpening the edge of his belt knife. She nodded toward his knuckles, scraped and raw. You're bleeding. Splinters. Let me. He hesitated, then held out his hand. Selah dipped her fingers into the tin and worked the salve gently over the torn skin. Her touch was precise but not cold. You ever think about going back east? She asked. I left it behind for a reason. Family there. No one left. She wrapped the linen carefully. You ever want one? Cassian tilted his head. A family. Selah tied the knot with a quiet tug. A name passed down. A place at the table that doesn't vanish when the wind shifts. He didn't speak right away. The flame from the lamp caught in the curve of her wrist. I've wanted a name passed down, but I never had someone to pass it to. She looked up. You do now. Cassian's throat tightened. Selah, I'm not asking for anything tonight, she said. But I need to know what you see when you look at me. He rose slowly, careful not to let the chair scrape the floor. I see the woman who made this place feel like more than shelter. I see the person who turned quiet into comfort. Selah didn't move. And if I asked to stay, I'd build the rest of my life around that answer. She let out a breath, not shaky, just full. Then I'm staying. Cassian reached out, resting his palm against her cheek. You sure? I was sure the first time you listened without asking anything back. He kissed her then soft, certain, the kind of kiss that wasn't rushed or hungry, only real. She leaned into it, hands against his chest, steadying herself not because she was uncertain, but because she was choosing. Later, as they stood by the window with the moonlight stretching low across the floorboards, Selah traced the edge of his collar with her fingers. I think we'll need more chairs come spring. Cassian smiled, quiet and full. Then we've got work to do. The first frost came early that year, softening the earth at dawn and silvering the window panes by morning. Cassian rose with the cold pressing through the floorboards, but the weight beside him in bed was warm and steady. Selah stirred when he moved, her hand sliding over the linen sheet until it found his. Don't go yet, she murmured. He settled back beside her, arm curling beneath her shoulders. Her hair smelled faintly of cedar smoke and the rosemary she'd crushed into the washwater last night. The barn roof won't fix itself, he said against her temple. You'll have a whole winter to patch roofs. Lie still a little longer. He did. The light was thin and pale outside, but inside the room was close with warmth and the quiet rhythm of Selah's breath against his ribs. There was no rush anymore, no trail waiting. No need to ride out at first light chasing something that wouldn't hold. By mid-morning, Sadie had gathered the last of the gooseberries, her apron heavy with the dusky fruit. She set them on the kitchen table, cheeks pink from the cold. They'll keep well if we dry them right, she said. Selah nodded. We'll string them this afternoon, hang them by the stove. Sadie looked between them. I was thinking about school. There's a woman in Tombstone who teaches reading. She said she'd take me on if I come twice a week. Cassian looked over. You'd ride that far? She said I could board there Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Her husband's a blacksmith. It's safe. Selah met Cassian's eyes. She's ready. He studied Sadie for a moment. You want this? I do. Then we'll help you get there. Sadie's shoulders lifted, pride warming her face. I'll still help here, just not every day. Cassian stood and opened the cabinet, pulling down the tin of coins he kept behind the flour sack. We'll make sure you've got what you need. Selah stepped beside him, hand brushing his as he counted. Thank you. He didn't answer. He only kissed the top of her head and passed her the stack to wrap. That evening, Cassian and Selah walked the fence line behind the barn. The posts were holding, but the wire would need tightening come spring. The ground was hard beneath their boots, but the sky above was painted with the kind of light that only came after the last heat had burned off. Selah paused, fingers grazing a dried seed pod clinging to the fence. "I was thinking we could take in a few sheep," she said. Cassian raised a brow. "You planning on shearing them yourself, I'd learn. Sadie too, if she stays through next winter," he nodded. "We've got room." She looked toward the hills where the sun dipped low behind the pines. "Sometimes I still wake up thinking I'm somewhere else, somewhere I have to run from." "You're not," he said. "I know, but it takes a minute." Cassian reached for her hand. "Then I'll wait with you until the minute passes." She turned toward him, eyes clear in the last light. "I never thought I'd be loved like this, not quiet, not steady." He touched her cheek. "I didn't know it could feel like breathing, like just being alive beside someone." Her hands slid up to the sides of his face. "I want to marry you." He let out a soft breath. "I was working up to asking." She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that came from deep inside. "You don't need to ask. We're already building everything that matters." But he did ask the next morning at the table with Sadie watching and a loaf of fresh bread cooling on the counter. He had no ring, just a folded strip of tooled leather he'd carved with her initials. Selah took it without hesitation, tied it around her wrist, and kissed him in front of the stove while the kettle whistled. The wedding was held on the back pasture the following week. Miss Elkins, the older widow who lived north of their land, brought a small book and read the words. Sadie stood beside them, hair braided, hands steady. There were no guests, just the wind and the orange trees in bloom and the two horses grazing quietly nearby. Selah wore a dress she'd sewn from muslin dyed with walnut hulls. Cassian wore his cleanest shirt and the boots he'd set aside for years. When Selah placed her hand in his, it was not trembling. It was sure. After they sat on the porch and watched dusk fall over the land they'd claimed together. Sadie brought out chairs and poured cider into tin mugs. The dog lay at their feet. No one said much, but everything was understood. That winter, the sewing room became a place of laughter and soft lamplight. Sadie returned each week from Tombstone with new words and stories. Cassian began to carve a cradle from ashwood, though Selah hadn't told him yet. She would. Soon, their life was not grand. It was not filled with more than they needed, but it was full. Cassian never rode far again. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't want to. Selah woke each morning with her hand in his. And each night she fell asleep knowing the roof held, the doors locked, and the man beside her had chosen her with his whole, quiet heart. And every spring after, when the plum tree bloomed behind the house, she planted her hands deep into the soil and gave thanks for the long road that led them home.